In 1992, a 16-year-old boy stood in a long line at a government office in Mountain View, California. He wasn't there to apply for a permit or a high-tech internship. He was waiting with his mother to collect the food stamps that kept them from starving. At the time, nobody in that line thought much of the quiet immigrant from Ukraine, but they had no idea who this kid would eventually become. Fast forward 22 years, and that same young man, John Coombe, would return to that exact building, not to collect a check, but to sign a contract worth $19 billion. This is the story of how a refugee who grew up in a house without hot water built the world's most powerful communication tool and walked away from Silicon Valley on his own terms. The story begins in 1976 in a small town outside of Kyiv called Fastiv. Growing up in Soviet-era Ukraine, John's early years were defined by constant scarcity. He lived in a home that lacked basic necessities like electricity and hot water. It was a harsh environment, made even more difficult by the shadow of anti-Semitic persecution. By the time he was 16, the situation became unbearable, forcing Jan, his mother, and his grandmother to leave everything behind for a new life in America. Life in America offered a struggle for survival rather than immediate success, and the family survived on food stamps and disability payments while living in a subsidized apartment. But inside that apartment, Jan was fueled by an intense intellectual curiosity. He couldn't afford new books, so he developed a cycle of necessity. He would purchase used computer networking manuals from a bookstore, study them until he mastered the content, and then return them for a refund just to afford the next one.
Morning.
By 1997, John's self-taught skills landed him a job as a security tester at Ernst & Young. It was there he met Brian Acton, a man who would become his closest friend and business partner. Later that year, Yahoo hired Jan as an infrastructure engineer, a role so demanding he decided to drop out of college to focus on his career. But while his professional life was moving forward, his personal life was falling apart. He lost his father in 1997, and just 3 years later, he watched his mother pass away from cancer. Left alone, Jan found solace in his work at Yahoo until 2007, when he and Acton decided it was time to walk away. In a massive twist of irony, both men applied for jobs at a rising social media giant called Facebook. They were rejected. In 2007, the future billionaires were told they weren't good enough for the company, leading Acton to famously post that he was looking forward to life's next adventure. That adventure began in earnest in January 2009, when Jan bought his first iPhone and realized the potential of the new App Store. He incorporated a company called WhatsApp on his 33rd birthday, but the early versions were a disaster. The software crashed constantly, and Jan nearly gave up. Everything changed in June 2009 when Apple launched push notifications. Jan realized he could pivot WhatsApp into a messaging platform that used a phone number as a simple login, making it feel like a free global version of SMS. Jan and Brian ran the company with a defiant philosophy that rejected the Silicon Valley norm. Jan kept a note on his desk that read, "No ads, no games, no gimmicks." He firmly believed that advertising was an interruption to the human experience and a violation of the private bond between users. By 2014, WhatsApp was a global phenomenon with only 55 employees. Facebook, the same company that had rejected Jan years earlier, announced they were acquiring the app for a staggering $19.3 billion. When it came time to sign the acquisition papers, Jan didn't choose a luxury boardroom. Instead, he drove to the North County Social Services office, the very building where he and his mother once waited for food stamps, and signed the deal on the front door. It was a silent, powerful acknowledgement of his journey from scarcity to the top of the world.